Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Muhammad wa ahli baytihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin.
Allahumma
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa
Muhammad.
ajil darajahum. We were talking about those false witnesses and to settle for that they needed to, if they harm someone, they need to make up for that. For example, if the person they testified against lost something of monetary value, they need to pay that back. They need to reimburse them, and whatever they have harmed them, they need to make up for that. Also, they should announce that they have done this in the square. It says here that uh, they have to have remorse for the sin. And we talked about the way of repentance, how it's not just saying it, but it requires a lot of actions and other things. So we left off talking about that, and now we're going to go into 20th greater sin, concealing evidence. It goes along with the other last two chapters that we mentioned. It says to refrain from testifying in an Islamic court is clearly classified among the greater sins according to the authentic tradition narrated by Shah Abdul Adim. There are some situations when it is wajib to prove what is right and to prove wrong what is wrong. In the narration mentioned in the previous chapters, Imam Bakr alayhi salam states that to conceal evidence is a greater sin, and he brought the following ayat to prove that, which was, do not conceal testimony. Whoever conceals it in his heart is surely sinful, and Allah knows what you do. This Surah Baqarah ayat 283. This verse mentions the sinful heart. There are two noteworthy points in this. He says the first one, that concealing of testimony is a sin of the heart. The heart alone commits it, and other organs are not apparently involved in it. The person hides the reality in his heart and doesn't speak it out. Secondly, just as the heart is superior to all the organs of the body, the sin associated with the heart is also greater than the sin performed with the other organs. It is just like the obedience of Allah through one's heart is much superior than obeying him in the actions. It is this same heart that involves one in a sin like polytheism. So, kufr, nifaq, these are sins of the heart. Also, this one, concealing the testimony. Said these sins of the heart are definitely more than the sins associated with other organs. One of the sins of the heart, according to the ayat of the Quran, is concealing evidence. In order to emphasize, Allah says in the latter portion of this ayat, Allah knows what you do. So the sinner would realize that even though people may not be aware of Allah, of what they are, people might not be aware that you are concealing it, but Allah is aware. Allah is Al-Khabir, the one who is all aware. Al-Alim, the one who is the all knowledgeable. And Allah will hold accountable for that. So this comes in to play when one has to have awareness of Allah, remembrance of Allah. And even though the other people don't know what you're concealing, but Allah knows. And then Allah will hold us accountable for these actions. And another ayah, and the witnesses should not refuse when they are summoned. Surah Baqarah ayat 282. And also ayat 140 says, and who is more unjust than he who conceals the testimony he has from Allah? Such a person is like the Jews and the Christians who had seen the characteristics of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Torah and the Injil, but they deliberately concealed those characteristics in order to maintain their power and mislead people. Due to the Jews and the Christians hiding the truth while they knew it, it resulted in the deviation of many. Look all the way till now, those people who concealed those evidences back then, those testimonies that they knew that that was the prophet, all the way till now, people are still deviated from that. And we should also not hide or conceal beneficial things from our brothers or sisters in faith. If we have a way that we can benefit them or they'll be at loss and we were able to testify to help them, we should not conceal the evidence. Imam Qadam alayhi salam, he said I inform you that the most obligatory right of your brother in faith is that you do not hide or conceal anything which is beneficial and useful for his worldly affairs or his affairs of the hereafter. So this is one of our rights that we owe our Muslim brother or sister in faith, that we should not conceal anything that is beneficial for them. The next part says, testify for the truth even if it harms you. Surah Nisa, ayat 135, Allah says, O you who believe, be maintainers of justice, bearers of witness for Allah's sake, though it may be against your own selves or your parents or your near relatives. If he be rich or poor, Allah is nearer to them both in compassion. Therefore, do not follow your low desires, lest you deviate. And if you swerve or turn aside, then surely Allah is all aware of what you do. So one must not conceal testimony due to the fear of the rich or mercy for the poor. So, for example, someone is afraid of someone who's in power, powerful position. He is saying because he is rich, he should not conceal his testimony based on that. One must not feel undue compassion for those who are poor to keep them to conceal the evidence in order to, for example, not testify for the other side who is in the right. They say, oh, they're already suffering enough. I don't want to testify against them. We have to stand up for justice, as the ayat says. But he said, one should neither pay heed to one's own interests nor care for any other person's interests while giving testimony. Only have to stick to the truth of what is right. The divine command should always be respected in entirety, he says. He brings ayat Surah 5, Surah Ma'idah, ayat 8. O you who believe, be upright for Allah, bearers of witness with justice, and let not hatred of a people invite you to not act justly. Act justly, that is nearer to piety, and be careful of your duty to Allah. Surely Allah is aware of what you do. According to this ayat, the testimony that we give should be only to seek the pleasure of Allah. No feeling of enmity should be allowed to come in the way or come in one's heart in the way of blocking the truth. And Allah says in different verse in Surah Talaq ayat 2, give upright testimony for Allah. So we shouldn't allow our emotions to make us swerve from justice when we're telling the truth. We have to stand up for justice, no matter who is the accused or the accuser or any of these things, whether they're rich or poor or all of these other factors. We have to be upright in our testimony. Imam Bakr alayhi salam says, on the day of Qiyamah, day of resurrection, Allah shall cut the flesh of the one who conceals evidence, then order that person to eat it before all the other creatures. This shows such a harsh or staunch punishment for this greater sin, that it's not something like, okay, I'm just going to hold it. I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm just going to keep it to myself. But this could also obstruct other people's rights from being upheld. By you withholding the testimony, it may harm someone else by not allowing them to receive their rights, for example, and that could affect that person's livelihood, their children's livelihood. It could make them destitute, for example, when the testimony could have saved them from that. Imam Bakr alayhi salam, he also says that one who conceals the evidence are described in the Quran as those whose hearts have sinned. Hearts have sinned actually implies that the hearts have disbelieved, according to the Imam, a type of disbelief. Another tradition from the Imam says, one who goes back upon his testimony or conceals it wholly, Allah shall cut his flesh and force him to eat it before others. When he will enter hell, he will be chewing on his own tongue. Na'udhu billah. Seek refuge in Allah from these sins. Imam Qadhim alayhi salam says, when you are asked to give evidence, then give it. For Allah says, surely Allah commands you to make over trust to their owners. Surah Nisa, ayat 58. And the author says, evidence in itself is a trust. Allah says in Surah Baqarah, ayat 140, who is more unjust than he who conceals a testimony that he has from Allah? So we have a sort of obligation that we need to give towards the other party when we could have, for example, uh, something come to my mind. I remember I was in my apartment when I was living in DC, and it was on a main road, so there was two big roads, maybe 3 lanes one side, 2 lanes other side, going one direction. Then cross it is another same thing, and then there was another road coming diagonally, and this was like a major intersection. And I remember we were sitting on the couch. I was sitting there, me and my wife, and then we had a friend over. He was visiting. He was sitting there, and we heard boom, and then we're like, "Oh wow!" With glass and like everything, like kaboom everywhere, And we went and we looked, and we saw out the window, and there was this guy. He didn't know English, a Spanish guy, and there was some other people there, Americans, and they were arguing and yelling, and then the police were called, and then my friend saw like the ladies were fine, and they were yelling at the guy. He didn't know what they were saying, and so my friend went down there to talk Spanish and help the other guy, and the police came. And before the police came, when they heard the sirens, the ladies laid on the ground and were like, oh, like my back and, my neck and everything and all this stuff. They couldn't move. And, and the police came. And if my friend didn't, tell them all these ladies are faking, they're lying on the ground and they were just fine and yelling and almost trying to hit the guy a minute ago, maybe that guy would have gotten in a lot of trouble and he could have lost a lot of money in his car, or could have got sued and all sort of other things. So this could have been implication if you withheld the testimony and said, I'm not going to bother with that. I'm going to keep it to myself. And we told the police, and the police said, yeah, we know. And, they resolved the issue. So this is just one thing that came to my mind, that practical example. So he says, in the following tradition of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, that's narrated in Tafsir al-Qummi, says one who possesses some evidence has to make it known. And when he is asked for it, he must give it. He should not fear anyone's criticism. He must fulfill his obligation of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahi anil Munkar, enjoining good and forbidding the evil. The author says, is it wajib that one must testify? And, do we have to or not? Or what cases do we have to? He said, is it wajib to become a witness if one is requested to do so by a believer brother, in order he may achieve some benefit from the case he is pursuing in an Islamic court? According to most of the mujtahideen, it is wajib. And he brings ayat of the Quran, Surah Baqarah, ayat 282. It says, and call in to witness from among your men 2 witnesses. But if there are not 2 men, then 1 man and 2 women from among those whom you choose to be witnesses, so that if one of the 2 errs, the second of the 2 may remind the other. And the witnesses should not refuse when they are summoned. So in the ayat, it's telling us that if you are summoned to witness, you should not refuse. Hisham said that he asked Imam Sadiq alayhi salam about this ayah, and the witnesses should not refuse when they are summoned. And in the succeeding ayah, and do not conceal testimony, meaning concealing testimony from hakam al-shar'i, or like a Islamic judge. It says numerous traditions state that to be a witness is wajib. For example, they asked Imam Qadhim alayhi salam about the same ayat. Imam replied, when someone calls you to give evidence in a matter of some debts or some right, then you do not have the choice to ignore it. He says, of course, the author says, of course, the Quranic command in the verse 282 of Surah Baqarah, asking the witness to testify before the Hakam al-Shar'i, implies that the person had in the first instant been a witness to the transaction. So it means like if someone was not a witness and you call them to witness, but they don't know about it because they weren't there, but you just want to witness, then obviously they don't have to do that. And they cannot give a false testimony if they have not seen the thing taking place.
Sheikh, I have a question on that. Is it only in the Islamic jurisdictions, or it could be, in this country too? Do you have to be a witness, whether it's a Muslim or non-Muslim?
It's a good question. I'm not particularly sure on that, but if it's involving a Muslim, I would think that you would need to go. Because it would still apply, because you're concealing something or from your Muslim brother, for example. But I think I need to ask more about that one and
Yeah,
and follow up
because
with that.
it is possible that you witnessed something that in a gang-related incident, and the implication of that would be that you will be killed and your family will suffer. So what do you do in those instances?
I think we'll talk about that, and it gets a little bit further in this chapter.
Okay.
We'll talk about those instances where you fear for your life and other things. But this is just general stuff. Someone is like a property or car accident or something where just someone's trying to get their rights. Yeah, but not a life or death thing. I think we'll cover that in this chapter. I remember reading something about that. And if we don't cover that, I'll ask specifically about the courts of the non-Muslims. Okay, he says, let's see. The person who witnessed the transaction has to exercise extreme care and caution in this regard. He must memorize all the details or put them in writing, if necessary, so that there is no scope for doubt or misunderstanding in the future. If this person is called upon to be a witness, it is wajib on him to comply, even if he has to travel some distance. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he says there's 4 types of people their dua is not answered. He says a person who sits idle at home and prays to Allah to provide him with sustenance. He is told, have we not ordered you to make effort for obtaining your sustenance? So someone, he is laying on the couch and he's like, Ya Allah, send me food, and Ya Allah, send me some direct deposit into my bank account or something like this, without putting any effort in. He's not working, he's not teaching, he's not doing any sort of thing, business or whatever. He doesn't put any effort in. He's just sitting down and saying, Ya Allah, just send me my sustenance. This person will say, haven't we ordered you to go make effort for obtaining your sustenance? The person who prays for some misfortune for his wife, he is told, have we not given you the choice of giving her a divorce if you don't want such a wife? Why would you make a dua and then ask for some bad thing to happen to your spouse? Allah says that we have given the right to divorce. You shouldn't have to wish bad on the other person. Just khalas, is divorce and go on your way. Don't pray for any evil to befall that person. The third one is the one who squandered the money and spent it in evil ways. Now he prays for sustenance. He is told, did we not order you to spend in moderation? For example, the person, he has all his monthly salary and he goes to the Las Vegas or Atlantic City or somewhere and blows all his money at the gambling table. Then he goes home and says, Ya Allah, please give me more money. I need more sustenance. This person, he shouldn't have done this. He's already been commanded to spend in a moderate way, not to spend in haram ways or bad transactions. The last one is one who gives a loan to someone but does not make anyone witness it. Hence, if the borrower refuses and the creditor prays, he is informed, have we not ordered you to have witnesses? So if in these cases, it's always good to have a witness when giving someone a loan, especially if it's some substantial amount of money and it's not like you're giving someone $20 and it's not going to hurt you, so much even if they leave and don't give you your $20 back. But for example, they ask for a loan of $10,000 and you don't make a witness to the loan, then it could cause problems in the future. So it's good to do as Quran says, to have witnesses in these things. If not, you could incur your self-harm, and there's nothing you can do because you don't have any witnesses. He said there may be occasion when a person has not directly witnessed a transaction, but has some information for having heard or seen something related to the issue. If the information he has can save a Muslim from harm or enable him to secure his right, it is wajib on the person to testify if he is summoned. If he is not summoned, it is wajib for him to volunteer to testify by approaching the Hakam al-Shar'i with the information that he has. If by not disclosing what he knows, a Muslim is harmed or loses his right, it is haram to remain silent in that case. We cannot sit and watch someone's rights get violated if we know otherwise. For example, everyone is accusing such and such for killing the other person, but we know that we witnessed someone else did it, and it wasn't that person, and that person was somewhere else. If we don't come forward, then they will get convicted of the murder and maybe get the capital death sentence on them. So we need to come forward, and remaining silent would be haram in that case. He says, in short, if a person is capable of helping the oppressed or prevent the oppressor from oppressing, it is wajib on him to do so. It is not wajib to give evidence in a situation where not testifying does not cause any harm to a Muslim, nor does it deprive him of his right. In this case, a person can even refuse to testify if he is ordered to do so, because neither is he a direct witness to the dispute, nor is his silence harmful in any way. So we see if it doesn't cause any harm, then you don't have to. But if it will cause harm, financial harm or physical harm, or harm to their reputation, for example, their honor, then we would need to step in and testify. They have narration from Imam Bakr alayhi salam. He says, if one hears an evidence, he becomes a witness, but he had not been made a witness, then if he likes, he can testify, or he can prefer to remain silent. So in those cases, he has the option. If no one has nominated for him to be a witness, he does not need to go and step forward to be the witness if it has no effect on the person's harm or loss of some of their rights or something of that nature. The witness is required to pay attention to all aspects of the matter that he has witnessed, and when he is testifying, he must only say that about which he is certain. He must not mention those things which he has not heard or seen. It should be clear as the sun, as mentioned in the tradition, that everything should be clear. As someone says, oh, do you believe the sun exists? It's like, yes, because you know for sure the sun exists. So in the case of what you have seen, there should be no doubt. There should be no doubt as to what you have seen or what you have heard, or you shouldn't go off of hearsay that you heard someone else has told you this thing and that thing. And his narration says that there's 4 fingers width of between truth and falsehood, and as the 4 is like this between what you have seen and what you have heard. So we should go off what we have seen and not what we have heard from other people. He says it should be known that a testimony should not endanger the life, property, or honor of a Muslim. Should also not pose a threat to the life, property, and honor of the witness. This is what we were talking about. So if it poses a threat to the life, property, or honor of the witnesses, and then he says, we'll continue the paragraph. He says, it is wajib to give evidence and haram to conceal it, so that justice is established in society and injustice is eradicated. The oppressor ought to be punished and the right may be restored to its owner. But if the testimony itself becomes the cause for oppression, it is not wajib to testify. Rather, it is haram to do so, and it is wajib to conceal the evidence. For example, if a person knows that if he testifies against a particular oppressor, like this gang, for example, you mentioned, the gang will take revenge on him and on his relatives, and on steal his money and other things. In this case, he says it is wajib to conceal the evidence. So if you testifying against for example, the mafia, and the mafia is going to kill you or kill your family or burn your business down and all this stuff, then in that case, have to conceal the evidence if definite it will result in harm, if there's no way to avoid that harm. Similarly, there may be a situation where a debtor deep in debts is unable to clear his debt because of his poverty. At the same time, he cannot prove his helplessness, and the creditor is not prepared to spare him. He wants his money, and he wants it right now. He doesn't want to hear any excuses. In this case, also, it is wajib to conceal the evidence if the evidence given by a witness will cause the poor debtor to be oppressed. So maybe that if he testifies, they will place that person who owes the money, they will put him in jail and take him away from his family and other things. The following traditions of our imams emphasize the justification of concealing evidence under special circumstances. So these are exceptions. If it's harm or oppression, and we see this in most of the cases with sins, or either with anything really, the harm of it is a secondary ruling when it comes to harm, a haraj. Or we even see this with Islamic rules as such as eating. We cannot eat pork, for example, or haram meat, or drink urine or blood, or all these najasat. We cannot eat them or consume them. But in extreme cases of death, that if you do not do this, then this goes to a secondary ruling of haraj, when it is too difficult and unbearable, and if you don't do that, you will lose your life. Then that first ruling is removed, and the secondary ruling allows you to do that. Or for in the case we have no water and we search for water and there's no water anywhere, we know that we need water, we need to make wudu to be able to pray. But when we don't find any water, then that hukum is removed, and the hukum thanawi, the secondary ruling, comes into play, where you can do tayammum, for example. So the same is like we have to give the testimony. Now, haraj comes into place that is difficult because you will lose your life or your business or your property, or your harm will come to your family. Then that ruling is removed, and the ruling for giving testimony that you have to is negated, and you don't have to in that special circumstance. So these are called like hukum thanawi, like secondary rulings.
So what happens then? You just don't show up in the court, or you don't, you'd lie that you didn't see it? How do you justify staying silent?
You would just I guess you would just have to say that you don't want to testify, that you don't want to. I don't know if they can't force you to say anything. No,
I see.
Say I don't want to.
Okay. I didn't see that.
I would, instead of saying I didn't see anything, or I don't know, or something like that, I would just say I don't want to go. I'm not going to go, and then refuse. And it depends. And then it would go into the second one where we said that lying is haram, but in case to save one's life, then maybe you would have to go further, if you could not do that, all the way to that one, and say that I don't know anything, or I forgot, or I'm not sure, or something else, even if you're sure. But that would be like last resort, and that would only become permissible due to extreme difficulty and imminent threat of losing one's life, or that type of danger.
I see.
So these are all like secondary rules that hopefully were never put in that place, but this is just secondary. If something happens, this is what happens in fiqh a lot of time, is like, if this is the rule, now if you don't have the thing for this, then you need to refer to this way, and if that doesn't happen, then you need to refer from this way, and it keeps going further and further.
Is that what they call here, the taking the fifth?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, you would just say,
okay, something like that. Okay.
yeah.
All right, I got it.
Okay. Imam Qadim alayhi salam says, giving evidence for the sake of Allah, give evidence for the sake of Allah, even if you have to testify against yourself, your parents, or your own relatives. But you must not cause harm to your believing brother by concealing evidence. However, if your believing brother is going to be oppressed, then do not testify. So if someone is going to oppress them because of that, not, for example, they have done something and they deserve to get the punishment for that is different, but they are going to oppress them for if they if the like for example, as like a non-Muslim judge, and the guy is going to cause him harm or something like that, or like in this time we can say in those days, for example, like one of the Umayyad rulers or Abbasid rulers, and they would just kill them, because of something. And if you can save the life of your believing brother by not testifying, then you do not testify. It says, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, give evidence for the sake of Allah, even if you have to testify against your parents or your own son, but do not give evidence to cause harm to your believing brother. And they asked him about this harm. He said, it is when someone who has a right, in order to obtain it, resorts to oppression, contrary to the order of Allah and the Holy Prophet. For example, a man is indebted to another, but the debtor is in straitened circumstances. In this situation, Allah has ordered that he must give respite till he becomes self-sufficient. Allah says, Surah Baqarah, ayat 280, and let there be postponement until he is in ease. Now, despite all of that, if the person who gave him the money, he summons you to testify, and you know that the person who borrowed the money is definitely poor and he's not in a place to pay that money back, then it's not permitted for you to testify that he has taken the loan, because the person who borrowed him the money, he should follow the ayah and give him some time to pay that, but instead he wants to oppress him because he doesn't have his money at this moment. So this falls under that same category as not causing harm to your believing brother or sister. Another narration from Imam Qadim alayhi salam says, I asked the Imam, one of your devotees has taken a loan from an enemy of yours. The creditor wants to oppress him and have him imprisoned. Allah knows that he has no money to repay the debt, neither is he capable to do so at present. He does not even have 2 just witnesses to prove his bankruptcy. Then is it allowed for him to take an oath so that he can prove his bankruptcy and obtain respite till the return of favorable conditions? And if from your Shia there are some witnesses who can testify against him that he has taken the loan, can they testify? Imam Qadim said, it is not permitted for them to testify, and it is not permitted for the creditor to oppress the one who has taken out the loan. So this is just confirming those other things that we have read about the harm coming to the believer. It says, when we speak about haram testimony that causes harm to a Muslim, we mean a wrongful harm or unjustified oppression. But if the person deserves to be punished, as I mentioned earlier, they have done a crime, it's wajib to give the evidence. For example, a person commits a crime. The witness of this crime does not testify, only because if he does so, the one against whom he testifies will demand the debt which the witness owes him. This is not valid excuse for withholding the evidence. The criminal must be punished according to the Sharia, even if the witness has to suffer monetary loss. If the hardship for the witness far outweighs the seriousness of the crime of the accused, then the witness has a valid excuse to refrain from testifying. So, for example, this person has hurt another person. He has beaten him, for example, and the person who was the oppressor, if you testify against him, you actually have a loan from him for some money. and you can't pay it. But if you testify against him, he's going to come after you for that money, like right now, and you don't want to do that. He said, even in that case, you still have to testify against him because it will cause harm to the one who was oppressed, who was beaten. So we should disregard it, even if you take some monetary loss. But if it is something small, I don't know, we could say, like for example, he fender bender, if we call it, like he hit the other car a little bit and put a dent, and it's not such a big deal. And if you testify against the guy who hit the car, he's going to come demand his $50,000 loan from you, which would be really difficult for you in that case. In that case, he says, if it outweighs the harm, if the harm outweighs the testimony, then you have a choice in that matter. All of these things relate to haraj, to difficulty, whether the difficulty is great or less, or these type of things. So it falls into on the person, if they feel that it will cause them extreme harm or not, because everybody's situation or circumstance is different. One person, $20 may end his the money that he has, and then someone maybe $1,000 is nothing for him, is the same as the other guy's $20 loss. Think about whatever these guys, Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or one of these guys, like, for example, $100,000 for them is maybe like $1 for us. It wouldn't harm them at all, but $100,000 for us would be impossible. It would be so much difficulty. He says, it must be mentioned that to be harmed is different from being deprived of some benefit. And in the examples already mentioned, if a witness refrains from testifying due to fear that the accused will deprive him of some money, or that some benefit may not accrue to him, this does not amount to being harmed. Like, you wanted to get a favor from the person, but if you testify, you're not going to get the favor. That doesn't mean that you're going to be harmed. It means just you're not going to get the favor that you wanted to get. However, if the accused is the employer of the witness and he will fire him from his job, causing untold hardship, then it is allowed for the witness to refrain from testifying, as it could be regarded as harm in common practice. So it depends on the situation. Maybe withholding maybe losing the job would be greater than what the person has done. But maybe what the person has done that you're testifying against is way more dangerous than losing your job. For example, the employer is sexually assaulting the women on the job. And he has sexually assaulted one woman or two women, and then you witness that, and you could testify and end this cycle that he is abusing women, but you'll lose your job. I think losing the job would be, better to lose your job and stop this type of crime, than, for example, if the person is, maybe he is taking some little bit of money, $100 or something. He took $100 out of the register, for example, of the company. But if you testify against him, and then you will lose your job, and you will lose your house, and you will not be able to put food on the table, for your kids. You will have a lot of other things, that it will affect your livelihood. It will cause problems in your household. It will cause you not to be able to pay your mortgage and your car payment. And in that case, maybe the authorities come and arrest you for not making payment, and so on and so forth. Then in that case, it would probably be better not to testify and to, inshallah, let the person get caught later on down the road, or either testify anonymously by leaving a note or doing something to make people aware what's going on, and then they can look into it, maybe putting some camera to catch him on the other time. So like I said, it all depends. on how grave the crime is or what the loss may be. It's all different circumstances. It's not like one general circumstance or situation. It's all different. It just gives us the parameters to look at that. He says, hence we can conclude that false oath, false testimony, and concealing evidence, each of these are greater sins if there is no risk of any harm. If there is any chance of any harm to a Muslim or an innocent witness, then they do not remain sins. They are permitted. Rather, and this is the secondary rule. As I said, in the first case, they are greater sins. But if there's a harm to a Muslim or to a witness or something like this, then the sinfulness of the crime or sin is removed, and then it actually becomes permitted. As we said, in the case of eating pork is haram. But in the case of dire necessity, where you will die if you do not eat that, and it's the only thing in the entire place that you can eat, or you'll lose your life in the middle of the desert somewhere, and then that that forbidden aspect of it is removed, and in that circumstance you can do that. He says, rather, in some circumstances, these actions actually become wajib, as we have seen from traditions of Ma'sumin, alayhimus salam. However, as far as possible, one must give priority to the most important alternative. So, as I said, you have to take the situation, look at it, weigh it, see which way is better, which outweighs the balance, the harm caused or the loss that will incur, and all of these. There's a lot of factors to take into account in this situation, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us from ever having to get into these situations and let it all just be theoretical talk, and we can discuss the subject, and inshallah we don't have to face that in our lifetime. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.